All right, South Carolina, the focus right now, and you can see that any candidate worth his or her salt, well, now without a her, Carly Fiorina out of the race, trying to make a stand there. Very, very important stand of that. But it really doesn't take long if you think about it. Right after the last vote is counted to leave the state. I always thought it would be neat for a candidate to just sort of hang out. I know the votes are cast, but just stay a week more in New Hampshire, or just see what happens. Because the people then kind of think, well, wait a minute, you're up and gone, you're done with us and moving on. I know that's just the nature of the beast, but anyway, we're staying here. We love it. We love it. Okay, Bobby Jindal, he's staying with Marco Rubio. He's supported him and not shaken by the candidate's debate performance. Governor, it's always good to have you. Bobby Jindal admitted.
Thank you for having me.
Very good to have you. Marco Rubio admitted he didn't have a good fairing, and a few days after the fact, acknowledging that. Should he have acknowledged that about his debate performance right away to mitigate the damage? What do you think?
Well, Neil, a couple of things. Look, I'm glad he admitted it wasn't a good night for him. Leadership is taking responsibility, making changes. I'm more of a substance over style guy. The reality is he got a lot of criticism for saying the same thing over and over, but Neil, what he said was right. You and I have had this discussion. Is President Obama, is he incompetent or is he ideological? The reality is he has done great damage to our country, and some of it I think is intentional. He has intentionally made more people dependent on government. He's intentionally weakened our foreign policy abroad. He's intentionally piled on debt, trillions of dollars on the backs of our children. So,
but what did that have to do? What did that have to do? I hear what you're saying, sir. But what did that have to do with the matters at hand and the moment and the questions that were coming up, that he pivoted, and he did seem to pivot right back to that sort of stump speech?
Well, look, it was not a good night for him, and it was right for him to admit that. It was right for him to make changes. The reality is one debate's not going to make or break this campaign. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Let's be honest, in New Hampshire, both two men did very well. Donald Trump did very well. Bernie Sanders did very well. You look at Donald Trump, his best friend is the fact that there are so many candidates running. Neil, I think 50% is his biggest enemy. I don't think he can get above 50%. And I think after New Hampshire, you're going to have more candidates stay in. I think for Bernie Sanders, look, let's make this announcement on your show. The socialists have taken over the Democratic Party. The reality is that Hillary Clinton hopes they'll give her their line on the ballot, but they may go the real thing. The socialists, you remember there was a Clinton who at one time said the era of big government was over. That doesn't seem to be the case in the Democratic Party anymore.
I know you're not a fan of
Sure.
Hillary Clinton and all, but in the Marco Rubio case, I mean, he did dial this back. He says he's not going to let that happen. He's maybe fortunate in that if Chris Christie, fortunate for him, is opts out of the race, certainly can't debate this weekend because he wouldn't make the debate if he wanted to, that his biggest tormentor is gone. But did Christie reveal a weakness that the candidate should address, that he's almost too scripted, too picture perfect? I take nothing away from his brains, his just general eloquence and smarts, but that Christie revealed a big vulnerability.
No, look, I think it was one bad debate performance. The reality is that Marco, the reason I'm supporting him for president, he has been consistently right. And you look at one of the biggest issues of this race, it's our foreign policy. I think he's got more foreign policy knowledge, experience. He is for a bold foreign policy where our allies can trust us, our enemies can fear us, and will fear us again. You look at Marco.
Well, how would you get him to? How would you get him to be different, to do that, or to get that across? I talked to many CEOs like Jack Welch, for example, who were clearly impressed by Senator Rubio, a bright young man. He says stuff like that, the kind of stuff you hear a lot. But that he's almost too perfect. It's the idea that, wait a minute, you're a little too polished. I get that too, Governor. But you know what I mean? Like, is that a danger? Is that, by the way, I do not get that. But what do you make of that? That he's got to humanize himself a little more? I don't know.
Well, Neil, a couple of things. Nobody's ever accused me of being too perfect. So, I mean, if anybody ever wanted to insult you or me like that, we'd take it. But, look,
right.
I'd say this about I'd say this about Marco. I think he should do what he's been doing. It's worked for him very well. I think he should continue doing these town halls, continue meeting with voters, answering their questions, continue taking the fight to Hillary, not just attack other Republicans. Look, it was one night. The reality is he's had a very good campaign. He's had a very good career. He's a principled conservative. He's led the fight in many areas. He has successfully, for example, gone after a part of Obamacare, for example, the billions of dollars that were supposed to bail out the insurance companies, put into place legislation to allow the VA to fire executives when they're not doing their jobs. So he's been leading the fight in a number of important areas. I would, look, if I were him, I wouldn't let this alter my fundamental strategy. It has been working for him. He needs to continue talking directly to voters and presenting an optimistic vision for the future. Let the Democrats be the party. Look, they've got one candidate from the 90s, Hillary Clinton, another candidate from the 60s, Bernie Sanders. Marco should continue focusing, as he has done, on the future.
What are you doing these days?
I'm glad you asked. A couple of things. Well, I'm running America Next. That is a policy think tank. You know, in my terms as governor and when I was a candidate for president, I focused on addressing the challenges facing our country. I'm doing that through the think tank. I'm also making up for a lot of missed time in the carpool lanes. I'm spending a lot of time dropping off and picking up my kids from soccer, baseball, and other practices.
All right. Well, I wish you well, Governor. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.